So in this episode, we are going to talk about why energy is your number one currency and how not to get caught in the judgment trap. I'm going to share with you the biggest trap that you potentially face over the coming months. So my name is Aloise.life, and by the end of this video, you will have an understanding of exactly why you need to protect your energy. You will also understand what the number one trap is that we all potentially could fall into. And also we're going to touch on shadow work and what is happening in the collective and how you can do your own shadow work and help heal not only yourself, but the collective. So my name is Aloise.life. I'm a transformational teacher and coach. I'm the creator of the Dharma Life Academy, and I'm also the host of the Dharma Life podcast. And essentially, I'm here to help you build a 5D life in alignment with your soul. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I do videos every Friday, and I'm also interviewing incredible thought leaders around their journey and obviously their opinion on what is happening at the moment. And we've got some incredible guests coming up, and also doing a female roundtable with Elizabeth April and Anna Wood and Nyla and Christine Elvig. So lots to stay tuned for. But without further ado, why is your energy your greatest tool, and why do you need to protect it? Well, obviously at the moment we are in a spiritual war. Essentially, there is a silent war happening in the background. And if you haven't already, please go and listen to my Great Awakening Part 1 and Part 2 videos so you understand what I'm talking about. But if you are clued up and awake to what is happening at the moment, you will understand that for a huge amount of time, humanity has been repressed and kept in a lower level emotional vibration purposefully. So dark forces can effectively feed off our energy. Now, over the coming months, there will be a big trap that everybody's going to fall into. And I just want to give you the heads up on that because I've already fallen into it. So I just want to share my experience with you. But essentially, at the moment, it's so important that we are protecting our energy and that we are keeping ourselves in a high emotional vibrational state. So obviously there is a lot of craziness in the world at the moment, and I think, we've talked about this analogy of the butterfly and how when a butterfly comes out of its chrysalis, it literally eats itself, so it has to get messy. And obviously what we're seeing at the moment, even though we're having this great awakening happening, is it's a bit messy. The old paradigm is falling down, and obviously the new paradigm is being birthed silently in the background. So things are a little bit shaky, a little bit up and down, and I think that will probably continue for the next sort of 4 years or so. And everybody's talking about this second wave. Potentially there could be some more things happening in September. So you have to start to think about your energy as a currency. So it's really important you keep yourself in a high emotional vibrational state, because obviously others around you will essentially be looking for you to support. And if you're a light leader, if you're a star seed, then your role is essentially to help the vibration of the planet. So the trap that we want you not to fall into is obviously everybody's at different stages of their awakening process. And that means that our families could be in 3D, we could be in 5D. Different people in our lives are at different points. And obviously the danger is that we end up judging them. If you're awake and aware, you kind of have this like, oh, come on, will you hurry up? Please wake up because we need you. And judgment is very, very much a 3D vibration. For us to be in 5D, we need to really be accepting and loving and compassionate. And this can be really, really difficult if you are getting into conflicts with people around you around what is happening in the state of the world. But I really wanted to point this out because your energy is your currency. And also what will happen over the next couple of months is essentially it's like divide and conquer. I think the censorship could get a lot worse. I think that we potentially could fall into the trap of infighting and fighting one another. And obviously this drains us and drains our energy. And again, it's kind of what the dark forces want. They want us at each other's throats. They want us not coming together in unity consciousness, because our power is as a collective. Our power is when we come together. You know, and I know this from my own life. You know, I am in a relationship with my husband and I love him dearly, but he is not awake to what is happening at the moment. He would much prefer to meditate, and he would much prefer to just to bypass it. And obviously I am against that. So I'm sharing this with you because the trap that I have fallen into is very much to kind of judge him and say, come on, wake up. And we've been having discussions, arguments around it. And obviously what I really noticed was how that impacted myself and how I was feeling. And I have felt really strong all the way through what has been happening since Corona kicked off, because I've understood that we are shifting into the higher emotional vibrations, that we are ascending, and I've understood the greater reason for everything. So the trap that we potentially can fall into is we start to judge the people around us for not quite being where we want them to be. And of course, this polarizes us. This ends up with us in a state of which is not going to work. We need to unite. We need to come together. We need to be asking the right questions of the authorities. We need to be focusing on the 5D world to manifest that vibration and to bring it in. So just a little heads up, because if you find yourself getting triggered, if you find yourself getting annoyed or judgmental, those are all lower level 3D emotional vibrations. We need to be in compassion, we need to be in unity consciousness, and we need to be in a really loving, accepting place. These people will come along and they will wake up. We have to be sure of that, but we have to be supportive in their journeys. So I wanted to also talk about shadow work today, because obviously if we're getting triggered, there's work for us to be doing. This is the new 5D vibration. As and when we start to lose our cool, as and when we start to feel triggered, you know, it's all about the work inside of us. You know, it's all about coming back to us. What's happening is where we haven't integrated our shadows, we're projecting onto other people. So the work really now in 5D is always turning it back on ourselves, always bringing that mirror back to ourselves, because really all we can do is heal ourselves. So I said that we would talk a bit more about shadow work, so I want to go into shadow work and discuss that with you guys now. But really the collective shadow is coming up on the planet. We are seeing all this information coming up on the planet that we haven't seen before. And of course, all of that is coming up for us to look at and for us to integrate. So the collective shadow, you know, what we're seeing at the moment is obviously where everybody's starting to understand about the human trafficking, people starting to understand about adrenochrome, people starting to understand literally how we have been suppressed and used as currency all of our lives. So much information is coming to light. And the reason that is happening is because when Mother Nature is ascending, she has moved into the fourth density in 2012. And as such, she's purging those lower energies. They are coming up to be integrated, and that means being felt. Very important that we are integrating our own personal shadows, because then effectively we are serving and helping the collective. So I wanted to make the rest of this video about shadow work. You may or may not have come across shadow work, but shadow work is a massive, massive term, and it's a huge area. So I'm going to do my best, obviously, to cover it in kind of 10, 15 minutes. So please, if you're interested in this, please go and do your own research. There's so much on YouTube about it, but it's very poignant, it's very poignant at the moment, just because this is exactly what we're seeing happening on the planet at the moment. So your shadow is a dark omen, a powerful teacher that reveals to you the places in your life where you are energetically blocked. When you continue to ignore these signs, you perpetuate a cycle of suffering. When you don't integrate your shadow, when you ignore your shadow, it will come up in bigger and bigger ways for you to integrate it and to feel it, to heal it. So what is your shadow? Well, imagine when you are born pure, you are born whole. And what starts to happen as a child is you get to a certain age, probably about 2 or 3, and you start to learn how to get love, what is acceptable in your family, and what behaviors get you love and what behaviors get you disapproval. So think about your own upbringing, think about your own background, think about the family and household that you grew up in. What did you learn as a child was acceptable behavior? And what was discouraged and frowned upon in your family? So I'll give you an example from my own life. We were a very stiff upper lip British family. We didn't talk about our feelings. We didn't talk about loving each other. We didn't talk about any emotions whatsoever. And I remember as a bare child, almost crying, being frowned upon. It wasn't acceptable to be upset, and it wasn't acceptable to show your emotions. Now, our shadows are parts of ourselves that we disown. Essentially, what we don't think is acceptable, we push into our unconscious and into our shadow side. So we push it away because we don't think it's acceptable to express. And it pushes itself into our unconscious, and so we are not fully conscious of it. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. And this is because we don't even know it exists. Our brains literally don't know that isn't acceptable. Essentially, as human beings, we should be balanced in every area. We should be able to feel every single emotion. We should be able to express every single emotion. But we learn through conditioning what is acceptable in our families, and so potentially we then start to hide parts of our personality. So to become conscious of our shadow, it's recognizing the dark aspects of our personality as present and real. This act is essential for any kind of self-knowledge. It really is, because as human beings, we're all about becoming whole. Really, that's our journey as we progress, is to heal ourselves and come back to being whole. Now, the thing about the shadow that makes it very difficult is we don't even know it's there. It's a bit like what's happened on the planet with everything at the moment. I was fully aware of the corrupt, the elite, the banking systems, etc., but I was not fully aware of how child sex trafficking, for example, and how human trafficking was the biggest industry on the planet. That was something that was hidden from me and then got revealed recently through the outbreak of corona. So as a planet, right now, our collective shadow is coming up. For us to ascend, for us to go into the higher emotional vibration, for us to go into the 5th dimension, we have to integrate what is happening currently. So I'm sure many of you have found how upsetting it's been to uncover and discover what is happening on the planet at the moment. And it's so important that we feel those emotions. I can't stress that enough. You have to go through a process, and I'm going to show you the process that we will personally go through to heal our shadows. And of course, you can use the same process when you're dealing with what's happening in the collective shadow. But we need to integrate these shadow aspects of ourselves so they never happen again, so we learn the lessons, so humanity as a whole takes a stand for never having any of those dark things happen on the planet ever again. And of course, we want to be on this we are on this golden age timeline, and it's essential for us to, when we come into the ascension process, that stuff can't exist, can't happen. So it's coming up right now for humanity to look at and for it to integrate. So anything out of balance in your psyche will be coming up for you to look at right now. In my last episode, I talked about the fact that we need to get into energetic alignment. And say, for example, you're in a shit job, or you are doing something that you don't like, or you're in a relationship you don't like, that will be really, really prominent right now, because it's encouraging you in this higher vibration that we are now in to look at that stuff so you can integrate it, so you can get into alignment, so you can be your true authentic self, living your dharmic life, living your heaven on earth. You know, in 5D, as I said before, you won't be in a crap job that you hate. You won't be living in a place you don't like. You won't be in a relationship that you don't want to be in. You know, none of that will be acceptable or even sustainable because of the energy. So anything out of balance in your psyche is coming up for you to look at right now. So again, I'm seeing this work really is poignant with my coaching clients. We've gone through it in Dharma Mastery, in my mastery community, and we've been really looking at our younger dark shadows, because it's time now fully to integrate them. So what happens if we don't do shadow work? Well, I can speak from experience here. In my 20s, my shadow was coming up for healing in a huge way. This is kind of just before my spiritual awakening. I mentioned to you that in my family, in my household, emotions were not acceptable. So I grew up as a young adult, very emotionless. I didn't cry. I viewed crying as weak. I remember once a friend turning up on my doorstep, and she got lost coming to my flat, and she cried, and I was just like, why would you cry? You know, like literally such a heartless bitch. I was like, why were you crying? That's a really weird reaction, you know. But it was only weird because for me, I wouldn't do it. Now I didn't even realize this, you know, I didn't even realize that I was suppressing my emotions. I didn't realize that I wasn't functioning energetically. And most of us have been taught not to feel. Most of us have been taught that emotions are bad. Most of us repress and don't necessarily feel our emotions. So for me, what happened is this pattern kept on repeating. Every time I would get emotional, rather than feeling my feelings, I obviously didn't think that that was acceptable consciously. So I pushed them away. And I remember actually an instance where a friend of mine from school died, and instead of feeling that, instead of going home and grieving for him, I went out and got drunk, because my pattern was to distract myself through alcohol. So when my shadow came up, which was the emotions, I couldn't handle it. So I went off and got drunk, because I was drinking my emotions rather than feeling my feelings. And so this might sound familiar to you guys. If you've got a pattern of behavior where you, for example, get triggered and then you go out and have a binge, the thing triggering you will be your shadow. And what happens is it comes out, and we get into destructive patterns and destructive behaviors. And also we can project onto others. So you might look at someone and go, oh, that person's doing this, this, and this, and this. But actually what you're doing is projecting your shadow onto somebody else, because that's the part of your personality that you haven't integrated yet. So really this work, us being a 5D being, us being a 5D citizen, it's all about bringing everything back to ourselves. We have to heal our inner child. We have to take responsibility for our own healing journey and for being a 5D citizen. And this means integrating our shadows. So shadow work was coined by Carl Jung, and it's also Teal Swan has done a lot of shadow work, and Debbie Ford, who's also very well known for shadow work. And They're very much parts that are seen as unlovable and unacceptable, and we relegate them to our shadows. So, to give you some other examples, things like anger. If it wasn't acceptable for you to be angry in your family, you might project your anger onto others now, or you might be passive aggressive. Could be something like you weren't allowed to speak up in your family. So, I'd love to hear in the comments what realizations you maybe, if you've done shadow work before or you've having from this video. What is it that you weren't allowed to do, or what was it that wasn't acceptable for you? So it could be speaking up, it could be being seen. What was it in your family that was not acceptable? Every single family is different. So the mind doesn't know reality. It only knows your interpretation of it. So the mind doesn't know that it's supposed to be integrated, that it's supposed to be balanced, that it's supposed to be whole, and that actually every emotion is fine when felt and left to move through us. You know, nothing is good, nothing is bad, everything is neutral. But the mind doesn't know that. So obviously, at a point, it separates into its unconscious and its conscious. And if we don't heal our shadows, we just get stuck in the same loop. Like, I remember being in my destructive stage with alcohol and drugs for quite some period of time, probably 10 years or so, because I hadn't done this work, because I hadn't healed my shadow. And this can manifest itself as shopping, food, any way of essentially numbing out and distracting ourselves from really, really what's going on. So it's really valuable work to do. If you're listening to this, I would suggest that if you want to do this work, find a partner to do it with. Find a buddy. This is what we do in our mastery community. We find somebody to hold space for us, and we have that conversation. We go through and we talk about what it was that happened in our pasts, what it was that happened when we were younger that wasn't acceptable, and we start to dig into our shadows. So I'm just going to show you the process that you can use now. So it's a 3-stage healing process. Like anything, awareness is so key. So hopefully now you've got this real awareness of how your energy and how you use your energy in the coming years is going to be so important. Effectively, having awareness around the trap as well is really important, because you don't want to be falling into this trap of polarization, of fighting and infighting. You know, we as humanity need to come together, and we need to really start to use our collective energy to focus on the 5D, the world that we want to live in. You know, we're never going back, I don't think, to the way things were pre-corona, thank goodness. So really our work is now in, you know, what is it we want the world to look like, and holding that vision. But with regards to the shadow work, awareness is really, really key. So have a look at what it is that triggers you. Have it look at what the situations were that might be triggering you. You know, again, something that's really coming up for me right now is it's almost like any of my past trauma that I haven't integrated, that I haven't felt, is also coming up for me. I had a situation recently where something triggered me, a situation with a friend really triggered me and upset me. And my wise husband said to me, well, what is it really triggering? And of course, I realized that the situation itself was quite minor, but it was triggering my old stuff. And actually, when I went back down and down and down and down, I realized it was a situation in my 20s where I had been ostracized by a group of friends and been bullied, that I hadn't integrated. And actually, what the current situation was just a trigger to help me release the old stuff that I was holding on to. And you can get somebody to really hold space for you while you share with them about what happened in that situation. And ideally, you cry and you go back to that situation and you really feel it to heal it. The greater the feeling, the greater the healing. Otherwise, this stuff will manifest in bigger wake-up calls or illness. You know, this is the other thing that people don't really understand, is that past trauma, trapped emotions causes depression, causes us to have cystitis, causes us to have thrush, causes us to have cancer, all sorts of things, you know, where we haven't healed properly. And we are being called to heal. For those of you on the spiritual path and have been on for quite some time, you know that this is your work. For those of you who are newly awakened, well done, but now the work really begins. It's like this onion analogy. You're peeling back the layers, layer, because you really need to do this healing to become whole. And of course, what happens is when you go through this process, like I have a free video series, Made for More video series, if anybody interested in doing this work. I had very bad depression, as I described to you, and I had to go back and really understand how all of the lack of emotions that I hadn't felt were causing my depression, and I had to sort of dig through the trauma and release it all. And quite often, you know, we have to feel it to heal it, and actually it can get worse before it can get better. So awareness is really key. So the first stage in this process is awareness. What is it that you think was your shadow, essentially, when you were younger? So stage 2 is once you've dug in and found what you think your shadow is, and you've spoken to somebody and you've felt it and you've integrated it and you've felt it to heal it, then forgiveness is the next step. Of course, we only know what we know. There's a huge amount of stuff that we don't know. And as our consciousness rises as a collective, this stuff will be more widespread. Everybody will be helping and serving each other, and it will just become the collective consciousness. You know, I can see in a couple of years where we just get to this point where it's the collective consciousness shift, and everybody knows it's all about them. It's not about anything outside of them. We're not quite yet there yet. So what was the lesson? So stage 3 is all about integrating. And what was it you learned from this situation? What was it you learned from the pain? What could you do next time in the same position? It's really important that you get the lesson also from this, because when we get the lesson, the pattern won't repeat. So 1 is awareness, 2 is forgiveness, and 3 is integration. So obviously that's a really quick overview of shadow work, but if you're interested, please, and you know that you've got work to do on your shadow, please ask questions below in the comments. As I said, there's huge amounts of information available on YouTube about shadow work. I've mentioned some of the key people who do it. It is very poignant at the moment because of what is happening on our planet. You know, our collective shadow is coming up for integration. And obviously between now and the end of 2020, the big reveal, more and more stuff is happening, more and more stuff is coming out. And as a collective, we have to feel it to heal it. We want to demand, obviously, that this never happens again, and that the people who have done this to us be reprimanded and obviously charged, and all the sealed indictments are obviously will be unsealed, and that will be an amazing period of time. And as a collective, we will have to feel the feelings and go through this process. But in the meantime, please do not fall into the judgment trap. There is a real danger at the moment that we will fall into this judgment trap and really divide as humanity, and we don't want that. We need to come together. It's so important that we come together as a collective, because we are powerful, and we're even more powerful as a collective. So if you fall into the trap of judging somebody or getting into arguments on Facebook or getting frustrated that people aren't waking up, remember that's a 3D emotional vibration. You have to have compassion. We have to be in the 5th dimension. So thank you so much. If you made it to the end of the video, well done. Congratulations. We will be back with another interview on Monday. So please do subscribe and ring the bell. Any questions, please put them in the comments. Only nice comments, please. This is a very high vibrational state and place. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dharma Life podcast. I do hope you enjoyed this episode. Please come over and say hello on my Instagram, our Facebook group, and also please let me know what you thought. So if you are listening, please take a screenshot of the podcast that you are listening to. Tag me on Instagram and I will reshare your post, and please let me know what it is that you got out of today's episode. Remember, when we do our Dharma, we are happier, healthier, we live longer, and we have a deep sense of unshakable inner peace.